Hi everyone, how are you? Linda Osborne here. Welcome to my channel. I call my channel Catch the Vision, and I pray that during our time together this morning there might be a little vision that you catch from our precious Lord. And I want to talk today on the subject of shame. And I'm going to be in Philippians chapter 1, and the main verse that I'm going to be looking at is verse 19. And I had a really neat opportunity a week ago to my friend Cindy Powell asked me to join her on her Facebook Live, and we were in Philippians. She is doing a series called A Few Minutes in Philippians, and she's in chapter 1, and I joined her, and it was really fun, and I actually wanted to take that video and put it on my YouTube channel and do some kind of an intro to go into it to share what it was, and I really couldn't make that happen, and so I'm doing my own on just this one subject. There were several things that came up in our talk that day that were really wonderful, but I'm just going to talk for just a minute on the subject of shame. And just to give an overview, we know that Paul is in prison in Philippians. He's writing this letter from prison, and at the time, it's interesting because he actually says that he wants them to know that his circumstances, this imprisonment, have turned out for the greater progress of the gospel. And he goes on to share why that is. And he says that there are many out there preaching the gospel. He says some from envy, some to cause him distress, some just because out of pure motives to preach Christ. But he says either way, he doesn't care as long as the gospel message is being preached. And I just want to stop on that just for a minute and just say this. Some of us feel like we're imprisoned right now. And I know that we would never go so far as to compare anything that we're going through as to what Paul went through in this situation, being in a Roman prison. But I do think that we do feel that way. This lockdown has gone on forever. It's now September. I think it started in March. We got a little relief in maybe June. I can't remember exactly how it progressed. But I will say this, that even though it's been difficult, and I know there's a lot of you that it's been very difficult for, but either way, I do believe that it will have turned out for the greater progress of the gospel. And keep that hope alive in you that God is doing things right now. He's doing things that we can't see. We do not know what's going on behind the scenes, but he's doing things that we can see as well, because we see a lot of innovative things happening right now. I think of the concerts that are happening where Christ is proclaimed right there in places like Seattle and Portland and Washington, D.C. And some of you know exactly what I'm speaking of. And that's so exciting. We know that there's a lot of things going on outside of the church that are just amazing, outside of the walls, because the walls in most cases have been closed down. And we even see people standing up for the right to spread the gospel in a way that I pray will buy us freedom in the future. So there's a lot going on right now, and I think we need to look at it like Paul did, that it was going to turn out for the greater progress of the gospel of Jesus Christ. But right now, where he says this, and he's talking about the fact that some are proclaiming it, like I said, the gospel out of negative reasons, some for positive, but he says either way, it doesn't matter. I rejoice. Just so the word of Jesus Christ is being spoken. And then he goes on in verse 19, for I know that this shall turn out for my deliverance through your prayers and the provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, according to my earnest expectation and hope that I shall not be put to shame in anything, but that with all boldness, Christ shall even now as always be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. And then that beautiful verse 21, for to me to live is Christ and to die is gain. And there's so much that could be said on that verse, and maybe we'll do that another time. But for right now, I just want to go to that, what he says about shame. He says that it is his earnest expectation and hope that he will not be put to shame in anything. Now, he's in a situation that we might think of as shameful. He's in prison when he's writing this. Now, Paul had a viewpoint on that was so good. He considered himself a prisoner of Christ. But there might have been moments where he felt the shame of being in prison. I don't know. But we can understand that could be the case. But he sees it like, again, through this lens that takes the shame away. And he's saying, I know that in the end, in the end of all of it, I won't be put to shame. Now, there were other shameful things in his life, things that could have caused him shame. Do you remember the time that he was let down from the upper room in a basket? He was hidden. They had to put him in a basket and let him down to the ground level so that he wouldn't be caught there in whatever manner, whether it was because he was preaching or because they were just looking for him and wanted to get him in prison at that time. I think that might have been shameful. Can you imagine that? Having to hide in a basket? And in fact, I know that later, I think it might be in 1 Corinthians, I'm guessing chapter 4, but he talks about some of the things that he's gone through for the sake of Christ. And I believe he actually lists that as one of those moments. And in other words, of suffering. And I believe that there was shame involved in that moment. And there's another thing that I was thinking of, and that is the stonings. He's out preaching Christ and people are listening, and suddenly other people come and they begin to stone him. They see him as a heretic. I think that there were moments that had to feel shameful. And I was likening it personally to when I'm up at a podium and I feel like I'm not doing well, and how sometimes I'll go home from a teaching time feeling bad about how the message came out. And I was even thinking of how it would feel if I was up at a podium teaching and people began to get up and say, this isn't good, this isn't right, she's a heretic, or something of that nature, throwing stones at me, maybe verbally. How would I feel? Would that feel shameful? I was trying to liken it to how I would feel today. And it's interesting because I was thinking, the Lord reminded me of something that he shared with me probably just maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I must have had a bad moment teaching. That's all I can think. I can't remember the moment. I just remember what he said to me. But I remember I was sitting on my couch and probably in the morning, maybe having my quiet time, and I wasn't feeling good about something. Something was making me feel ashamed. And I remember, I felt like the Lord just said to me, you know, Linda, you need to pull back and get higher. You're looking at this moment as if it's everything, and it's just a moment. Get up and get higher and realize that on the higher level, what you are doing is so good. You will not be put to shame. You might feel ashamed at this moment, but in the end, you will not be put to shame. And I felt like he just reminded me that the trajectory of my life is serving Christ, and that is all good. And that along the way there might be moments, and there have been many of them, believe me, that I felt ashamed. There were times in my life where there was a lot of humiliation, and there were periods in my life that I felt ashamed. And even as a person, I have to tell you, I've carried a lot of shame. Some of it because of things in my past. Some of you can relate to that. Even things I've taken them to the cross, but the enemy brings them back to my mind. And there's been a lot of things along the way that made me feel ashamed. But I feel like the Lord was saying that day to me, get above it, Linda, and look at your life. In the end, I'm telling you, even though this moment you might feel a certain feeling, that's going to go away. But in the end, the good news is that you will not be put to shame. And not only not be put to shame because of the trajectory of my life, but because where I'm going to end is that final goal is going to be with Christ, right? And that's really what Paul is saying here. In the end, everything I've said, everything I've shared, everything I've believed, I will not be put to shame. It will all come to pass. That's what he's saying. And you know, I was thinking, when I was thinking about this subject in that scripture, verse 20 in Philippians chapter 1, I was thinking about hinds feet on high places. Now we're getting ready to do that retreat. I've mentioned that before. It's been postponed twice already. We're into that 3rd season of wondering when it's going to be. I believe it will be. I really believe in my heart God's going to bring it to pass. I can't wait. I'm so excited to see what he's going to do. But in the meantime, we're waiting. But what I was thinking about is that in the book Hinds Feet on High Places, the young woman, much afraid, is on her journey to the high places with the chief shepherd. And she has problems. She has a crooked mouth and she has crippled feet. And sometimes she's embarrassed that she's to even be known as being in the service of the shepherd, because she feels like it must be embarrassing to him that someone like me is in his service. And of course, he didn't feel that way at all. But all through her journey to the high places, he gives her promises all along the way. But in the very beginning, the main promise I believe is a promise he's given us. He says to much afraid that I'm going to take you to the high places. My promise is that I pledge myself that I will get you there and that you will not be put to shame. And I think that's a word for us today. If you feel ashamed about something in your life, and maybe you got a divorce, or maybe you had an abortion when you were younger and the enemy is using that against you, or anything that maybe has put you to shame. Maybe there was a failure of some sort. Maybe you tried to do something and it didn't work out and everybody knew that it didn't work out. Those are things that we get embarrassed over, or we feel humiliated over. I hope that you can pick up that word today, that in the long run, your great expectation and hope can be that you will not be put to shame. Just like much afraid, that eventually that mouth that's crooked will get straight and those crippled feet will be strengthened and you're going to make it to the high places. And that in the end, he pledged himself to get you there, and he will. And you will not be put to shame. So I pray that there's a word there. I pray you caught a little vision this morning. And God bless you. God bless you on your journey. Bye-bye.